I feel like the goal with any new wardrobe addition is to buy something that we're going to end up loving for a really long time. So what we really want to avoid is making shopping mistakes. And I thought today we could run through 12 things that you will always regret buying. And I've definitely made some of these mistakes myself. So we're going to start with the very first one, which is buying classic items that you think you should own. Now, these listicles, they quite often tend to be based off very kind of basic items. It's quite homogenous and it really doesn't play into our sense of personal style. They are classic items indeed, that's true. However, just because they're a classic doesn't mean that you have to own them. And really, I think that what you should be looking at instead is the utility of these items. How are they serving you in your wardrobe? What purpose do they hold? I have done a whole video on style essentials that you should have, and if you watch that, you'll realize that I'm talking about very general, very broad pieces, because what might be a staple piece for me is not necessarily going to be a staple piece for you. And if you're buying somebody else's style essentials, these items are always going to feel a little bit foreign because they aren't what you like to wear and they aren't reflective of your personal style. Next is the fantasy self purchase. And if you aren't familiar with this concept of fantasy self, it is essentially this idealized version of ourselves, the aspirational self, the self that we wish that we could be, but maybe our current circumstances don't allow for it. Maybe it's who we're working towards being in the future, but also it could be a reflection of our past self as well, because we go through different phases in our lives. Maybe we have moved city, maybe we have transitioned into a new job and we just have a completely different life than we had before, or potentially, and I think this is probably one of the biggest major ones that we as women tend to face, it is that transition from having no children to becoming a mother. Because during that particular season of life, all of a sudden our needs, what we need to wear, changes completely. We could go from working in an office setting to being at home a lot of the time, and also fabrics that we want to wear change as well. So a great way to kind of reframe when you are looking at something and you're maybe not sure is go, is this something that I could throw on tomorrow? When am I going to have the opportunity to wear this? Am I going to be able to look after it and not feel like it is too precious, like it's going to get damaged? Does this feel in line with the items that I'm wearing on a daily basis? And these are great questions to start asking yourself along with others to kind of lift the fog of the fantasy self from a potential purchase that might be a mistake. The next thing that you will always regret buying are too many trend-led items. The trend cycle has gotten faster and faster, and I think sometimes it can be hard to distinguish between what we want to play around with and experiment with and the essence of our personal style. When you start to let trends dictate what you are adding to your wardrobe, you are probably going to end up with this extreme mishmash of items. And quite often, if we are sort of playing into a trend, maybe we're not buying the creme de la creme, we're buying things that are a bit more affordable. So you might end up also having a lot of low quality, poor quality items in your wardrobe. There is definitely this desire within us that's innate to belong to a group. It's really in our nature, and taking part in these trends allows us to fulfill that need. So I can definitely see how it can easily be a trap that you fall into, but take my word for it, you'll always regret it. Look to kind of dabble in one or two for the season and really kind of leave it at that and let your personal style and your taste and preferences guide the rest of your purchases. Next one is the bargain. These are the things that you bought because they were on sale, and ultimately, maybe they're not something that you actually would have bought otherwise. You're buying it because it feels like a deal, but it's not a deal if you aren't wearing it, and you wouldn't have spent the money otherwise if you hadn't seen that it was on sale. If you weren't already considering this item, if it wasn't on your wish list, it's not filling a gap in your closet, you wouldn't consider paying full price for it, then it is probably not going to be a deal or a bargain at all, and just be one of those things that kind of weighs down your closet. Next purchase that we almost always will end up regretting is the emotional purchase. These are the things that we buy when we are feeling blue, when we're feeling down, and we kind of need that dopamine rush, that thrill that we get when we buy something new. It makes us feel great for a moment or two, but that quickly fades, and then we end up with this thing in our wardrobe that we bought when we were not kind of feeling our best. And maybe it sort of reflects some of those other points that I mentioned earlier, that it could be a trend piece, maybe it's reflective of your fantasy self, but at any rate, quite often these are items that end up sitting in our wardrobe with the tag still attached, or maybe we don't even end up enjoying wearing them because it wasn't a thought out, considered purchase, something that we kind of built up this anticipation in our minds and really waited to buy, and then we're just so thrilled to have it that we want to wear it on repeat every single day. So again, another one to avoid if you can, though I know how hard it can be to stop yourself from shopping when you are in that particular emotional state. And it's why I always say, if you can, try to stick to a shopping rule where you sleep on something for at least 24 hours, or if you want to do one better, a week, 2 weeks, or my personal favorite, the 30-day shopping rule. Next thing you'll always regret buying is clothing that you do not know how to care for. And I feel like this is a mistake that quite often happens when we are splurging on those more expensive versions of things that we already own. I think that sometimes there can be this expectation when we do spend a lot more money on something that it is going to wear 100 times better than anything that is more affordable. And the reality is that this isn't the case. If you want something to continue looking good for a long period of time or throughout your lifetime, you need to know how to look after it. How are you laundering it? Are you hanging it up after every time that you wear it rather than throwing it on the ground? Are you making sure that you get it dry cleaned at the end of the season if that's something that the care label entails? Are you conscious of the fact that it may pill and bubble, and how are you going to maintain that so that it continues to look fresh and new? If you don't know how to do these things, you're going to end up regretting buying it. And I think a really good example of this from my own wardrobe is the Row Cybum sweater, which I bought during the Boxing Day sales. And I was really thrilled to buy this, actually half price. I'd been considering buying it for the longest time, and that to me was the thing that tipped me over the edge, that really made me feel comfortable making that purchase. And I was very disappointed when I quickly realized that it pilled excessively, actually more so than some of my more affordable knitwear. Now, I know how to take care of this. I know how to remove the bubbling, but I wasn't expecting that to happen. I thought that it would be in pristine condition for a much longer period of time. So I do want to mention that, because it can definitely come into play and you can end up regretting some of these purchases if you're not quite sure how to look after them. Which brings me on to my next item you'll regret buying, and that is high maintenance clothing. Clothing that you aren't prepared to kind of put in the time and the effort to look after. And more specifically, this is really dry clean only clothing. And the reason for this is because there are so many more steps involved in looking after it. You have to set a time in your schedule to go to the dry cleaner, drop it off, then go back and pick it up. And if you aren't already putting this into your schedule, if this isn't already part of your routine, then it is going to feel like a lot of extra work. The same thing can be said for clothing that snags easily, because you're going to have to be really mindful when you are wearing it, in addition to clothing that is hand wash only. Now, I have a hand wash setting on my washing machine, so I don't find this to be too much of a barrier, but in the past, I would always put off hand washing because it just felt like a lot of work, a lot of effort, and then you've also got the drying time. And if you aren't willing to put that work in, then it's going to end up being unworn, and you're going to think, I could have put that money towards a purchase that I'm going to wear on repeat. The next are items that you love to buy but hate to wear, and this is something that stylist Alison Bornstein talks about a lot, and I feel like she's really distilled it to its essence so well. But these are items that you buy a lot of but that you just never reach for, and I think this kind of goes back to that sense of fantasy self, but also buying items because they are closet essentials, but they aren't reflective of your personal style. And I think the same can also be said for duplicates as well, in general, across the board. I think that when we do buy a duplicate, we think we're going to end up wearing it a lot because we love the original, and quite often that isn't the case. If it isn't fulfilling a new need or a new gap in your wardrobe, then you're probably going to reach for the original one more, unless you like the new one's color better. So always think, what purpose is this going to be serving? How am I going to be wearing this differently to the one that I already had? I think basic tees and basic tags and probably jeans, a silhouette that you really like, are exceptions. But I feel like in other cases, quite often we end up reaching for the one that we love the most over all of the others. Uncomfortable clothing is something we will always regret buying. Clothing that is too tight, that is pulling, that you have to kind of pull up, pull down, that just doesn't feel like it sits right. The fabric doesn't feel nice against your skin. You're never going to want to wear it. You might wear it once or twice, but then after that you will dread every single time that you think about wearing it, because you know you're going to have to deal with the fuss of kind of adjusting it all day, or even just the discomfort. It's one of the reasons why I'm personally so particular about fabrication. If I don't like the way something feels against my skin, I know I'm not going to wear it, and it just doesn't deserve a place in my own wardrobe. Another thing that we will always regret is buying something because it is designer. Do not fall into the designer trap. Just because it is a designer piece doesn't mean that it is better than something that is not a designer item. I think a really good example of this is shopping on The RealReal. Quite often you'll find these incredible designer pieces. They are from quite old collections and they're discounted, maybe they're $30, which feels like such a bargain. And this is where we're falling into the trap, because while yes, it might be that brand name designer, it's a piece from their collection, it is an older piece, it's vintage, it's also a steal. Would we have bought that if we saw it in the shop today and it was full retail price? And I'm gonna guess that quite often the answer is no, and we're only buying it because we see that designer name. What you need to think about here is this style something that you actually like? Is it a fabrication that you like, a color that you like? Is it something that you're actually going to wear on a daily basis? If it is none of these things, it is probably not a good idea to add it to your wardrobe. But also, just because something is designer doesn't mean that it is better. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is higher quality. And while price does usually suggest that something is going to be high quality, it allows access to high quality materials, high quality craftsmanship, there are always exceptions, and I stay firm in my belief that you can buy quality at every single price. I think a great thing to consider is, what is it that you're hoping to achieve with this item? Is it a particular feeling and a particular mood? And if so, can you achieve that with something else in your wardrobe? And I want to use an example from my own wardrobe, the Acne Studios mini Musubi bag. I bought this a few years ago now and it retailed for about $1,500. I've been eyeing it up for a really, really long time. So happy to add that to my wardrobe, and to this day it is one of my favorite bags that I own. However, I saw that Arket did a affordable alternative. While it wasn't exactly the same, it definitely felt very inspired, and I decided to order it with zero intention of actually keeping it, but I loved it so much that I did. And what I realized when I ordered it was that it gave me that exact same feeling that I got from wearing my Acne bag. While the price point is incredibly different, I mean, it's around $250 mark compared to $1,500, I still achieved the same look, but with a much less expensive bag. So ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve with this designer piece? And can you achieve that with something that is a little bit more affordable and perhaps more so in your budget? The next thing you'll always regret buying is only boring basics. And I mean the most basic version of those fundamental styles that we have in our wardrobes. I think one of the things where we really allow our personal style to come to the fore is when we start to add elevated basics into our wardrobes. Things that have little stylistic elements that we are personally attracted to. Maybe it's not everyone's taste, but it is things that feel like us. They fulfill that need of that basic piece in our wardrobe, but they don't feel boring because maybe they have a little bit of a cutout, maybe there's some ruching, maybe there's a little bit of a print to them. There is something about them that makes it feel unique and makes it feel personal to you, and those are some of the best basics to have, and they will be the key to making sure that you have a wardrobe full of things that do not feel boring. And the final thing we'll always regret buying is buying outfits over items that feel like an extension of our existing wardrobe. And this usually ends up presenting itself when we are buying items for a specific occasion. So maybe you are buying something to wear to a job interview, maybe you are buying something for an event with your girlfriends, maybe you're buying something to wear on holiday. Well, we're not really thinking beyond that. We're just thinking about the lifespan of that particular moment. When you take a step back and you start to think, what are all the different ways that I can wear this? Does it actually work with what I already own? If the answer is no, then it's unlikely that you're going to wear it outside of that setting. So just thinking long term as opposed to short term and outside of that scenario can be a great way to avoid making this particular purchase regret. The other way this can present itself is when you are buying something for your wardrobe, but the only way that you feel you can make it work is to buy something else new to go with it. And that is where you're buying an outfit, you're not buying something for your closet. So those are the 12 things that you will always regret buying. I'd love to know if there's anything else that you would add to this list. Please let me know down in the comment section below. If you're new here, I'd love for you to subscribe. I share a lot of styling advice, how to remix things in your wardrobes, brand reviews, but also I just want to say a huge thank you for spending some of your day with me. I'm always forever grateful. I hope you have the most beautiful week ahead, and I will see you next time with a brand new one. Thanks for watching. Bye.